he felt he was at fault, but in my heart, I felt like I was still at fault because I gave the appearance of, as a Christian, I'm supposed to have integrity, right? And the buzzer went, and I wasn't working. Through my conduct, I had given an occasion for someone to think less of the gospel because of the way I had portrayed Christianity. Christ is invisible, right? But we as Christians are visible. We are the visible expression of Christ to the world. And whenever we misrepresent Christ through our conduct, we can be an offense to other Christians or a stumbling block to unbelievers. So in this message, I will emphasize the importance of Christian conduct, or we could say lifestyle. And then I want to talk about 3 specific areas in which, if we fail, we may be offensive and cause our creed to lack credibility. Our goal should be that the only stumbling block for anyone to the creed of the gospel should be the hardness or the pride of their own heart and not the conduct of us as Christians. My title today is The Credibility of the Creed of Christians. And we're going to read in Philippians 1. You probably already turned there. Philippians 1, beginning at verse 27. Now, just for a little bit of context about Philippians, you probably know all this already, but this was one of Paul's prison letters, and it's marked by a lot of affection. If you go back and read the first part of the chapter, he talks so much about his warmth and his longing for them. He was separated from them by prison, not able to be with them. And he's urging them for their faithfulness, and he has heard of their faithfulness, and it makes him so happy to have heard. He hears from Epaphroditus, I think it is, that these people, though I'm separated from them, are still being faithful. He mentions his chains. And then he talks about himself. It's like he's wanting to inspire them. He says, for me to live, it's Christ, and to die is gain. Famous verse there. And then he comes now, so he says all those things kind of ahead of verse 27. And it's just, I think it's interesting the way he starts out this verse 27. Only let your conversation be as it becometh the gospel of Christ. So that sentence right there is what this whole message is about. I'm going to read a few other verses, but basically I want to focus on what he is saying right there. It's kind of like he's saying, if I can't have anything else, if I never get to see you again, I just want to know that the way you conduct yourself. The New King James says it like this: only let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ. Parents feel this way about our children, right? Like, I'm living in Indiana, my family's all in Virginia, and I know my parents, my dad is gone now, but I know my parents said many times something along the line of, I'm just glad that you're just be faithful. They don't care so much that we're not living together in the same community. But, what would it be like to be together with your children in the same community, but your children are not living for the Lord? Which would you rather have? And so Paul is saying, just make sure that you do this. To me, that's kind of what he's saying right there. Let's read the rest of the verse. Only let your conversation be as it becometh the gospel of Christ. That whether I come and see you, or else be absent, whether I see you or whether I don't see you, I may hear of your affairs. You so stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel. And in nothing terrified by your adversaries, which is to them an evident token of perdition, but to you of salvation, and that of God. For unto you it is given in the behalf of Christ not only to believe on him, but also to suffer for his sake, having the same conflict which he saw in me, and now here to be in me. I just want to go back and spend some time here just talking about verse 27 and asking us, how can we apply this in our life? Now, that sentence there, or partial sentence right there at the beginning of the verse, only let your conversation, this is the Old English, only let your conversation be as it becometh the gospel of Christ. I think we all know here that when the word conversation is used in the King James Version, it's usually talking about your way of life. Or, like I said, in the New King James, it says, only let your conduct be. King James says, only let your conversation be. But I found something interesting, actually. So as I was thinking about this message, I was collecting little tidbits and storing them away on a little file on my phone. And then, on Saturday then is the day to try to organize it all and it's something that makes sense. And it threw me off a little bit, something I learned here, this word conversation. The word conversation is used 18 times in the New Testament. And most of the time, 13 of the times, it's the Greek word anastrophe. And it just simply means, like I was saying, it means your manner of life. It means your behavior. It means your conduct. It basically means your character, your conversation. All right? But in this place, to my surprise, he uses a different word. Politeo. Politeo. Only let your politeo be as it becometh the gospel of Christ. It means something a little different, actually quite a bit different. It means to behave as a citizen. And by the way, politeo, does that sound like an English word? This is an election year. Politeo, politics, to behave as a citizen. I think, I didn't research this, but I'm guessing this is where we get this Greek word, politeo, is probably where we get our English word, politics. But it has to do with citizenship, right? So it just brought a new meaning to what Paul was calling out, saying, you're a Christian. You need to represent the king and the kingdom that you say you're a part of. It goes beyond our conduct. Now, our conduct is part of it, and actually, most of my notes that I'd collected ahead of time have to do with conduct, and those are the three areas that I want to make practical application as we get to the end. But I just thought it was significant, this word, politeo. It means to behave as a citizen. And Vine's dictionary says, conduct that is in accordance with the characteristics of the heavenly kingdom. We say we're from another place. You know what? Isn't it true that sometimes Christians, they say they're from another place, but they don't live like it, right? He's saying live like you are from another place. How would you live? If you were from France and you're living over here and you're the ambassador for France, how would you live? And that's kind of how it is for us as Christians. To me, that's what he's talking about. All right, so we talked about our conversation. What does that mean? I just like to pick apart some of these words. Only let your conversation be the way you behave as a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. Make your behavior match your creed. That's what he's saying. All right, and then he says, let your conversation be as it becometh. Let's look at that phrase. Let it be as it becometh. That sounds a little confusing. The New King James just says, only let your conduct be worthy. Be worthy. And we were listening to a song on the way to church this morning. Is he worthy? Is he worthy? You remember in Revelation where John the Revelator cried because they looked for someone that was worthy to open the seal, and they couldn't find anyone until the Lamb came. Is he worthy? He is worthy to open the seal. Well, we are called to be worthy, to live a worthy life too. Like all of you, most of you that are here this morning are Christians. But is our life, or is our conversation, is it worthy? In other words, is it up to snuff? Is the question. And I thought of the verse where Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10, it says, he that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. That sounds like a very extreme loyalty. Even your own mother, if you love her more than me, he's saying. And he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. It's like he's talking about relationships. There can be no relationship. It needs to be far below our loyalty to the Lord Jesus. And if it's not there, brother, you're not worthy. I'm not worthy of him. Or the cost that comes with following Jesus. If we don't take up the cross and follow after and obey, not worthy. Not worthy. And so our conduct needs to be at a very high level. We need to have worthy conduct, not mediocre conduct. This is so important. It's not okay to have our creed being way up here. The creed is perfect, but the conduct is, well, the conduct needs to be worthy of the creed that we say. I wonder if you could say in that verse in Matthew 10, if you could say, where Jesus said, he is not worthy of me, would he be saying that the one who doesn't love or take up his cross or follow, he's not worthy even to have me? If you're not willing to live on that kind of a level. All right, so we talked about our conversation, which I think it does include our conduct, our behavior, but also reflecting our citizenship as a Christian, that it's worthy of what? Of that it becometh the gospel of Christ. The word gospel is the Greek word evangelion. I think that's where we get, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing all these right, but it's where we get the word evangelism, comes from that. The evangelion of Christ. It means, you've heard this probably many times, it means the good news. It means a good message. It means good tidings. The first place the word gospel is used in the New Testament is in Matthew 4, verse 23. And there it says, and Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom. I think that's important to note that the first place that it is mentioned, it's not just the good news, but is the good news of the kingdom. He connects gospel, good news, to the kingdom. They are linked together. And for much of Christianity today, it seems like that when people talk about the gospel, more what they mean is, look, you can be saved, you can go to heaven when you die, you can have your sins forgiven, and all of that is true. But really, the gospel, this good news, is about more than that. It is more than just your personal salvation and forgiveness. But the gospel of the kingdom of God, or the gospel of Christ, like this verse 27 says, has to do with the establishing of Christ's kingdom and Christ as the king. Okay? Revelation 19, verse 16, talking about Jesus, it says, he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This is the King. This gospel of Christ, it establishes him. First of all, we recognize that Jesus is the King of the kingdom. Peter knew it when he said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Thomas recognized it when he said, I think he probably fell on his knees at the scars and he says, my Lord and my God. And Mary, when she saw Jesus in the garden after his resurrection, she turned around and she said, Rabboni, which is to say, Master. Christ, is that where you're at this morning? That Christ, you hold him in high esteem because he is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And he is inviting you. Jesus came to set up his kingdom on the earth, and he has invited us to join in to his kingdom. Let your conversation be as it becometh the gospel of Christ. So that whether I come and see you or else be absent, I may hear of your affairs. That you stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel. You know, the last part of verse 27, I think he is kind of defining, see, up at the front end of the verse, he said, let your conduct be worthy. Well, what does that mean? Now, at the back end of the verse, he's telling us what he thinks that it means. And it means this. So this is something we do together as a church now. See, when I think of conduct, I tend to think of me in the cabinet shop that morning. You weren't there, but I think of me, all right? But he is more making a corporate application, that if we're not all doing this, then we're not doing it. He says that so let's just apply this to our church, to Bethel. That you Bethelites, and if you're visiting here today, whatever church you're a part of, all right? Is this how you do it? You stand fast in one spirit. You're holding on. The world is calling you to cave in. A lot of the church is caving in. Stand fast in one spirit. You have a good the attitude, maybe the connection between one another, with one mind for one purpose, striving together for the faith of the gospel. That is what, to me, it's probably what Paul was saying. I want your conversation to look like this, what I'm saying at the end of the verse. What should that look like for Bethel? That we are one spirit, one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel. I thought of 3 things that I would like to see us, and I think we are doing this. Is it worthy? Is it where it should be? We can always grow, right? But I think of one, that we would be striving together for a faithfulness to the doctrine of Scripture. That we're just wanting to faithfully apply Scripture. And it's we think this way. This is one thing that we are about here in our church. I hope that is how we think. A faithfulness to doctrine. And then growing in fellowship, deepening our connections one to another. It's easy to be a stranger in a place with a lot of people, right? Like on a public bus. Plenty of people around, but no fellowship. So, faithfulness to doctrine, growing in relationship, able to get below the surface with one another. I think that would be part of being worthy of the gospel of Christ. And so those are 2 things within the church, and then just reaching outside of the church to the lost and to the needy. You know, the question should be that we ask ourselves in church is not, some people say, well, I'm looking for a church. I haven't found one that I like yet. I'm just, went over here and it wasn't, so I went over here and I guess that's good. If you're looking for a church, you should probably do that. But really, in the end, it's not so much, what do I want? Is this what I want? I don't know. It should be more, the question should be more, what does God want to see? And whether or not I'm comfortable with it or not, I should be trying to line my life up with what God is saying. What does he want to see? All right, let's just look at a few more of the rest of these verses that I read. In verse 28 it said, and in nothing terrified by your adversaries. Oh, okay. How much opposition do you face as a Christian? Do you have any opposition? Well, we always have opposition, right? Because the devil is after us. And the old flesh is in us. So there's 2 oppositions right there. But I think he was probably talking about more than that. He was talking about probably persecution or, some kind of retaliation from adversaries. And I know a lot of times in some of these books that Paul wrote, he also referred to adversaries like the Judaizers, coming and trying to get them to observe the old law and go back to circumcision, things like that. But he says, you just strive together for the faith of the gospel, and you're not fazed by the opposition. You're not unsettled. You know what? I felt unsettled just recently. I remember one time talking to a oneness Pentecostal. Sheila and I went to meet with this young man, and when we got there were about 4 other people there that we did not know were going to be there. That made my heart start pounding right there. And we had a long discussion about biblical doctrine, about whether or not the Trinity is really right, and whether or not Jesus, like the oneness Pentecostal would say, that Jesus is the Father, Jesus is the Son, and Jesus is the Holy Spirit. They don't believe in the Trinity. And were more prepared than I was. It's like a Jehovah's Witness when they come to your door. They have all their verses lined up, and you're kind of caught off guard, and they go away, and you feel kind of like, boom, boom, boom. Did I say something wrong? I felt unsettled. What Paul is saying here is in nothing unsettled by your adversaries. You do verse 27. Not unsettled by the adversaries. If it's persecution, if it's false doctrine, if it's false brethren. And he says, the very fact, which is to them an evident token of perdition, it's like he's saying, the fact that you remain unsettled in spite of the opposition, to them it shows, you know what, you're lost. I'm trying to get these people to fall, and they're not even unsettled. What does that say about me? It says, in fact, I think the New King James something like said it's a proof of perdition. Yet you're not unsettled. But to you, the fact that you remain unsettled and steadfast, striving for the faith of the gospel, is a token that you are on the right track. To you of salvation, and that from God. They can't take it away from you. You just press on. And so this thing about conduct is, yeah, we have the world on the outside, we have the flesh on the inside, but there's also going to be opposition. There might be family members. And there might be persecution in this country. I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised at all if even in my lifetime that will be against the law to what? It seems like we're not too far away from that right now. And he's basically saying in the last two verses, if that's the case, don't be surprised. In fact, unto you it is given in the behalf of Christ. Now, Christ did something in the behalf of you, right? He provided the blood that would wash away your sin on your behalf, right? He says now, on his behalf, on behalf of Christ. It has been given to you, or I think the New King James says, it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, not only to be saved, but also to suffer for his sake. Don't be surprised. Suffering is part of the redemption. Isn't that how redemption came? Only through suffering. And if you and I are going to be part of redemption in the lives of others, many times it's going to be in the very same way. Through suffering. Also to suffer for his sake. Having the same conflict which he saw in me, and now here to be in me. Jesus had it. Paul had it. The Philippians had it. And we should expect it. Opposition. So another way of saying it might be this. Let your daily character and your response to false accusations or unfair suffering be worthy of the gospel of Christ. You know, many of us can be pretty worthy as long as there's not too much opposition. But it's when we're oppressed, when we face that false accusation or whatever we think is unfair, that is where sometimes we have not responded in a manner that is worthy of the gospel of Christ. Before I go into those three areas that I want to mention, I just want to talk about, in fact, I'm going to have you do a little homework with me and turn to several scriptures in a row. Can we do that? Turn to Acts chapter 24. I want to show us how Paul, Acts chapter 24, I want to show us Paul's standard. You know, he says here in the passage we just read about what the conduct should be like. All right? What kind of a conduct, what kind of a testimony did he say the Philippians were supposed to have? Was he holding them to a standard that he himself did not hold? That what I want to show us is what Paul's standard was for his own self. And I think this is a theme that he repeats over and over again about how he kept his own testimony and conscience clear. Acts chapter 24, verse 16. This is when he was standing before Felix. And he says, "And herein do I exercise myself to have always a conscience void of offense toward God and toward men." He tried so hard to have his conduct be in such a way that nobody could ever say, well, you go fishing on Sunday, whatever it is, right? They couldn't say it because he strove always to keep a conscience void of offense toward God and toward men. Now look in the next chapter. Now, verse 8. Now he stood before Felix, now he's standing before Festus. Verse 8. While he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar have I offended anything at all. It's like Paul was he's always this close from wanting to share his creed with you. He was just ready to witness. And so he's taken away all the stumbling block. Nothing that anyone could say that would say, well, yeah, but you do this, his conduct. That was important to him. Now turn over to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Now the two passages we just read were Paul's testimony about himself. Now here we see in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 32, we see what he's telling now to the Corinthian people. He's giving them the same advice as what he said about himself. Give none offense, no stumbling blocks, neither to the Jews. That's the religious Old Testament people, the ones that were still following the old law. Nor to the Gentiles. That's to the people that are not Christians. Nor to the church of God. Those are to the Christians in the church. So basically he's saying, don't offend anybody. That's basically what he's saying. Now, obviously, people can take offense at us, right, regardless of what we do. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about taking the offense away so that when you speak your creed, there's nothing in your testimony, nothing in your conduct that would discredit the gospel. All right, and one more, 2 Corinthians chapter 6. Second Corinthians chapter 6, verse 3. Now, I want us to just think about our conduct, our lifestyle. This is what Paul is saying to us, giving no offense in anything. And why? That the ministry be not blamed. When you try to speak to someone about the Lord, that they can't point to things in your life and say, yeah, but you do this. All right. Now let's go back to our passage in Philippians chapter 1. Actually, I'm going to read a couple more verses in chapter 2. There's actually 3 different places in the first 2 chapters where Paul basically is talking about the same thing. And if you think about the verses that I just read to you, it seems like this is something very important to him. His calling was to preach the gospel. That's the creed. The credibility of the creed was in the conduct. So he keeps saying, make no offense in anything. All right? But in chapter 2 of Philippians, verse 14, he says, do all things without murmurings and disputings. Christians, no complaining and no fighting, no arguing. And why? Verse 15, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God without rebuke or without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation or a nation among whom ye shine as lights in the world. Peter talking about Jesus, it says, a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense, okay? There is an offense to the gospel. There is that. And someone that has a proud heart will be stumbled by the gospel, but it should be by the gospel and not by the conduct of the Christian. All right. In the last part of the message here, I just want to mention 3 areas. You could name 3 better areas maybe than what I'm going to tell you. But these are 3 things that I'm trying to work on. I'm praying for myself nearly every day about these 3 things. And I've given them my own little names, and I'm going to try to explain. But I'm praying and asking God to take away anything that has to do with, that would question my integrity. Integrity, here are the 3 areas. Integrity, carnality, And the last area, I call it credibility. I'll explain each one of them. And just, these are 3 areas of our conduct that if we have blind spots or spots in our life that we're constantly, we're making room for any of this, it's taking away our credibility. And when you get up, you know what, if you're a preacher, you better have credibility. And there may be something I'm doing in my life right now that I don't know about that makes some of you feel like going like this, right? I know that's possible. That's why, to me, it's so important. But it's important for all of us as Christians, so that no one, because of what's going on in your life, your attitude, whatever, they would go, no, I don't want to listen to you. All right. I'm just going to give you my definition of what I mean by these 3 areas. The first one I said is integrity. Integrity. By the way, a little homework here. It's still before 11:30. What integrity, that word, what comes to your mind? You think of integrity. I'd just like to hear from you real quick, just off top. Honesty. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Doing what's right when no one's around. Very good. That's what I was thinking about. Both of those things. The first part of integrity that I want to mention is, I want to base this on a verse in the New Testament. Colossians 3 verse 2 says, set your affection on things above, not on things of the earth. Okay? The word affection there actually means different than how we use the term affection today. When we use the term affection today, we mean like we really love somebody, we feel warm. That's not all wrong with that. But how it's used here in that verse, it actually means to exercise the mind, to be, this is the definition I have, to be mentally disposed earnestly in a certain direction. So it's more saying, set your attention on things above, not on things on the earth. You see, you have a choice about that. And as a Christian, how many Christians do you know? They have the right creed, but their attention is their business, their hobbies, their bank account, their clothing. Seems like it. Set your attention on things above. And you know what? You can kind of smell it when there is a Christian who has the right creed, but you can tell where their attention really is set. And speaking of the word affection, wherever you, it's like in a football game. The attention is going first, and right behind comes the guy running the ball. That your affection comes right behind it. Wherever you're setting your attention, affection is sure to follow, right? So if you want to have your affection set on things above, set your attention there. Do your children, the people who know you the best, would they say about dad or mom, she has attention integrity? Does that make sense? Do your family, your church, the church members, your co-workers, the people that know you best, do they know that you, this is one area of integrity you have. You have attention integrity. Your mind is set. Yes, you have plenty of things to work on, of course, but your mind and heart is set on things above. Integrity is honesty. It's complete truth-telling. It is not saying the story in such a way that leaves a false impression or leaves all the blame on others and not on me. It's just, it's keeping my word, right? I've said this example before. There was a church member one time who was in a church who didn't allow the use of the radio. And I talked to this person, and they were leaving the church over that issue. And I asked why, and his reason was, this, I talked to the father, and he said, I don't even have a conviction against the radio. How can I teach my children not to listen to the radio when I myself don't even have that conviction? Well, I thought, what a terrible example. What a terrible lesson to teach your children. Would it not be better to say, son, I don't even have a conviction on the radio, but I'm part of this church. And Christians keep their word, right? That's pretty simple. So even though I don't have a conviction about it, I'm just going to submit. I'm just going to keep my word. And by the way, son, you should do that too. That's integrity. Keeping your word. It is a commitment to do what is right, even if it hurts. Psalm 15, verse 4. Well, verse 1 says, who shall abide in thy tabernacle, Lord? Who shall dwell in thy holy place? It's asking a question. And then it goes on and says, one of those people that will abide in that place is the one who sweareth to his own hurt and changeth. In other words, he does what is right even when it hurts. There is nothing in the non-spiritual parts of my life to discredit my spiritual testimony. And actually, the truth is, all of our life as a Christian is spiritual. That's integrity. Lord, and this is what I pray for myself. Let there not be anything in my life, in any area of integrity. You know what? People don't want to listen to what you say if you're lacking integrity somewhere. All right, the second area is carnality. Carnality is something often that comes up in our life when we're stirred up emotionally, okay? When we've been offended, when we've been hurt, gossiped about, whatever. And a lot of times when I say carnality, I'm talking about an underlying carnal motive that is often cloaked in the right words. Maybe an example would be like sharing the dirty laundry about another person as a prayer request. But the motive can be, I love talking about these things and saying the bad things about others, but I'm saying, oh, pray for them. But there's a carnal motive underneath. It's unholy. Jealousy, envy, hatred, right words, wrong motives. This is not spiritual, it is carnal. And there, sometimes in the life of Christians, are habits that come up, things that come up when the pressure is on, this carnal little thing, reacting, talking back, answering back. Anger, when approached. You know, with certain people, it seems like that if you tell them straight up something about their life, it's a guaranteed outcome. There's going to be a reaction. That's carnal. And I think carnality, and there's so many things. I want to quit here in about 5 minutes. But there's so many things that attitudes, my words, my thoughts, my inner feelings about others. If it comes out of Ephesians 4:31, let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speech. I was at a local business the other day to get a part for my weed eater. I talked to Steve, not Steve Koistra, another Steve. And Steve arts for 50 years, seemed to be a really good servant, I thought. And we started talking about lawnmowers. And I mentioned the name of a businessman, a Christian businessman, one of our kind of people, that also sold lawnmowers. And on the look in his face was like, and so I pressed Steve a little bit. I said, Steve, what were you talking about? What was that? And it basically came out that, and I had actually heard this before from about the other businessman, his own people, that this man is known for greediness and covetousness and making another dollar. That's carnal. Selfishness, anger, attitudes, complaining. We just read that. Do all things without complaining and retaliating and answering back when we're spoken against. I'm asking the Lord to show me. There are patterns of carnality in my life that, as long as it's going smooth, I don't answer back. But when I'm under pressure, is that when it comes out? I don't want something in my life that would discredit the gospel. Integrity, carnality, and the last one, I called it credibility. What I'm talking about here is things that are not necessarily sinful, but they are things that are off. Habits have. It might be on your spoon drives everyone else crazy. It might be something simple like that. Or it might be uncontrolled appetites. It might be eating too much and others see it. And because you or I are just shoveling it in, we're known to be shovelers. It can be something like this. Is it sinful? Well, maybe it is, actually. If it's gluttony, it is sinful. But it's these kinds of things. Maybe it's personal habits. Maybe it's chewing your fingernails. Maybe it's happiness. Maybe it's you're always forgetful, always late. This person is always late. And then they try to talk to me about my personal devotions, and I just feel like going like this. So, seems ungrateful. They want to talk to me about God, and I just feel like going like this. These are things that are not necessarily sinful, but I just think I'm trying to examine myself and say, maybe you need to tell me, because I probably don't see it. But are there issues of credibility, like that are just regular habits in my life? And it is not being worthy of the gospel of Christ. All right? In closing, this morning, I would like to close with two stories of two people. One had credibility, and the other one did not. The first one is the story of the boy who cried wolf. There once was a shepherd boy who was bored as he sat on the hillside watching the village sheep. To amuse himself, he took a great breath and sang out, "Wolf, wolf, the wolf is chasing the sheep." The villagers came running up the hill to help the boy drive the wolf away. But when they arrived at the top of the hill, they found no wolf. The boy laughed at the sight of their angry faces. "Don't cry wolf, shepherd boy," said the villagers, "when there is no wolf." They went grumbling back down the hill. The boy sang out again, "Wolf, the wolf is chasing the sheep." To his naughty delight, he watched the villagers run up the hill to help him drive the wolf away. When the villagers saw no wolf, they sternly said, "Sing a song for when there is really something wrong. Don't cry wolf when there is no wolf." Down the hill once more. Later, he saw a real wolf prowling about his flock. Alarmed, he leaped to his feet and sang out as loudly as he could, "Wolf! Wolf!" But the villagers thought he was trying to fool them again, and so they didn't come. At sunset, everyone wondered why the shepherd boy hadn't returned to the village with their sheep. They went up the hill to find the boy. They found him crying. "There really was a wolf here. The flock has scattered," he said. "Wolf, I cried out, wolf, why didn't you come?" An old man tried to comfort the boy as they walked back to the village. "We'll help you look for the lost sheep in the morning," he said, putting his arm around the youth. Nobody believes a liar even when he is telling the truth. Now, the second story, that is someone that didn't have credibility. And I'm just comparing that to a Christian who has some of these things, some area of integrity, some area of carnality or credibility in their life. And they're crying out, "Wolf, you need to be saved, brother." And we don't want to listen. On the other side is Jesus himself. I think it's the most amazing credibility statement in the whole Bible. This verse in Luke 5, verse 5. Remember when Jesus said to Peter, "Throw your nets on the other side," or "Let's go out for a catch." And Peter said, "We fished all night. Didn't catch anything." But what did he say next? Nevertheless, at thy word, we will do it. Jesus had credibility, right? Jesus didn't know much about fishing. I guess he made the fish. He knows everything about it in one sense. But it was because he said so. As Christians, we aren't always talking with our mouth, but we are always talking with our life. And if our walk doesn't match our talk, we will undermine the credibility of the creeds of the gospel. Paul said, only let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ. Our conduct is so important, for it is the credibility behind the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. May God help us to live lives